Plymouth Colony paid £24 and 10 shillings for 8,000 acres of Wampanoag land in 1666. They held that deed for 12 years without settling it. Then they sold the same land for £280 and used the money to build a church. How do you buy a homeland, wait for a war to clear it, and call that founding a town? To answer that, we have to go back to 1666 and to a deed that Plymouth Colony had no immediate intention of using. The Wampanoag called this place Agawam. It means a place where fish are caught. For generations before any English deed existed, it was exactly that. Rivers threading down to tidal flats. Families working the same waters season after season. 3 bands lived along the Agawam and Weweantic rivers. The name they gave this land was not a label. It was a description of what the land gave them. That river still carries their name today. Everything built on its banks came later. In 1666, Plymouth Colony purchased Agawam, £24 and 10 shillings, less than the price of a good horse, for 8,000 acres of inhabited homeland. The buyer was not a private speculator. The buyer was Plymouth Colony itself, the colonial government, the same institution that held the courts, the militia, and the legal infrastructure of southern New England. They didn't buy this land to use it. The deed sat untouched for 12 years. No settlers, no farming, just a paper claim to someone else's home, filed and waiting. The local historical record, the same Chamber of Commerce materials that call this a founding, contains a sentence worth reading slowly. The tribes did not realize the full extent of what they had signed. That is the establishment's own language. An admission filed quietly in the commemorative record with no consequences attached. The man who held both ends of this transaction was Josiah Winslow, Harvard educated, born into Plymouth Colony's founding class. His father had arrived on the Mayflower. By 1673, Winslow was governor of Plymouth Colony. He was also, when the time came, commander-in-chief of the English colonial forces in King Philip's War. One man, the deed and the army, the land system and the war that would make the land collectible. His portrait was painted in 1651, a young man's face, 2 decades before the events that would define his legacy. The face in that painting does not look like a villain. They rarely do. Now consider the silence. Plymouth bought Agawam in 1666. From 1666 to 1675, that deed sits in the record and does nothing. No settlers arrive. No leases are drawn. The colony holds a paper claim to 8,000 acres of inhabited Wampanoag land and waits. The question the official history never answers is the most important one. What was Plymouth waiting for? In June of 1675, the waiting ended. Not because Plymouth suddenly wanted to farm, because King Philip's War began. Metacom, the Wampanoag sachem the English called King Philip, led a coalition of indigenous peoples against the English settlements of southern New England. His father, Massasoit, had maintained a careful peace with Plymouth for 40 years. When Massasoit died in 1661, that peace did not survive the generation. Within 5 years, Plymouth had purchased Agawam. Within 10, they had seized Metacom's brother. Wamsuta died in Plymouth custody under circumstances that were never explained. When the war came in 1675, it was not a mystery. It was the accumulated weight of everything Plymouth Colony had been doing to the Wampanoag since the peace treaty expired with the man who signed it. The war lasted 14 months. 12 English towns were destroyed. 1 in 10 Englishmen of fighting age was killed. For the Wampanoag, the arithmetic was categorically worse. Roughly 2,000 killed in battle. 3,000 dead of disease and starvation. 1,000 sold into Caribbean slavery. Not captured, not exiled, sold by court order under Josiah Winslow's administration. In August of 1676, Metacom was shot dead at Mount Hope, beheaded, drawn, and quartered. His head was placed on a pike at Plymouth, where it remained for 20 years. His wife and his 9-year-old son were sold to a sugar plantation in Bermuda. That is what the phrase "cleared territories" meant. That is the definition the founding history never supplies. Metacom's head would stay on that pike for 20 years. Plymouth Colony didn't wait that long to collect. Within 2 years of the war's end, the Agawam land was open for settlement. And in 1682, Plymouth sold it. All of it. For £280. 7 named English buyers received the deed. The stated purpose of the sale: to fund a new Plymouth meeting house. The Wampanoag Homeland became Plymouth's church. Now go back to that sentence. The tribes did not realize the full extent of what they had signed. Read it again, with the £280 and the meeting house in mind. That sentence is still in the commemorative record. It has always been there. The 1682 deed records every English buyer's name. The 1666 deed records none of the Wampanoag who signed it. We do not know who they were, which band they represented, or what happened to them in the war. We do not know whether any of the Agawam area families, the people who fished these specific rivers, who gave this place the name it still carries, were among the thousands sold into slavery. That is not a gap that more research will fill. The colonial record-keeping system documented the buyer's identity and erased the sellers. The silence in the record is the record. Every road, every house, every cranberry bog in East Wareham sits on the arithmetic of that markup. The Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe, with ancestral homelands encompassing the Agawam and Wareham territory, is a living community of approximately 200 members. They are not a historical category, they are neighbors. In November of 2024, Governor Maura Healey signed an executive order granting the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe state recognition. Not federal recognition, that process remains open. State recognition in 2024. 358 years after the deed. The plaque says founding. The ledger says collection. The river has been saying its name longer than either. Agawam, a place where fish are caught. That name survived the deed, survived the war, survived the resale, survived the incorporation, and survived 2 centuries of silence. You can drive through East Wareham today and cross the Agawam River without knowing any of this. Most people do. But the river doesn't care what you know. It has been carrying that name since before 24 pounds could buy it, and it's still carrying it now. We cover this part of Massachusetts because it's where we're from, and this is one of those stories that was always here. In the deed records, in the river name, in the commemorative sentence nobody was supposed to read too carefully. If you want to follow this further, the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe has a presence online, and that federal recognition process is still open. Next time, we're staying on the same coastline, different town, same colonial machinery, and a deed that gets even harder to explain.